Welcome everyone to the Boltathon, the world's first Lightning Network conference and hackathon. Um, this is Justin Camarena. He is the Lightning lead at Bitrefill, and he's going to talk about using Lightning Network in production. And Justin's kind of like my homeboy. I feel like I'm like your PR manager or your hype man because I keep asking you to like come speak at things. But man, every time you do, I learn so much. So I'm super grateful for that.
Right, so here's my presentation for the Boltathon. I'll be talking about using the Lightning Network in production. So to sort of, it's battling. Okay, so to sort of have some background, I'm a software engineer at Bitrefill. I joined as an intern in the summer of 2017. So what's Bitrefill for those of you that don't know? We are a gift card and mobile refill provider. We sell more than 1,650 products for businesses in more than 170 countries. We initially only did Bitcoin, but we also offer other cryptocurrencies. We also do Lightning. So our previous software API stack, so previously our backend, this is just mostly focused on Lightning. There was Node.js on the backend, MongoDB, Redis. Initially, we were a company that relied entirely on Bitcoin APIs. So this is a BlockCypher, like BitGo or BitPay, BlockTrail. We had many of them integrated, many as fallbacks. We wanted to move away from these APIs. So we removed most of the centralized APIs and we started hosting our own Bitcoin node. So that was one of my jobs as an intern that when I joined Bitrefill. So initially, there was a part of the time when I was there that high fees were becoming a problem for us for payments. So we introduced other solutions, so sort of like a centralized account balance so that you can deposit crypto, withdraw crypto from there and pay for products, the fees and other cryptocurrencies. At the time, Lightning wasn't really ready for mainnet, but I was testing it on testnet and interested in getting it live on mainnet. So the first step for that was implementing Lightning support over on testnet. So here are the current Lightning backend choices. C Lightning, which is, I think uses only Bitcoin D and Spruned. I'm not sure there's other options. Eclair, Bitcoin D, and Electrum. I think Electrum's experimental. LND initially was only BTCD. It does Bitcoin D and Neutrino on testnet. Not on mainnet yet, but some have modified that to work on mainnet, which is like a light client. And then Bitcoin Pay, or BTC Pay, I'm not sure it's how everyone says it, with C Lightning or LND. There's also OpenNode, which their backend is LND, but they're a centralized service that offers a easy API. And then there's also the payment processors, Globee, CoinGate, and others. Well, those are mostly for payments. So what do I think about the state of Lightning node software? I think LND is the most superior in API-wise. It's the easiest to dive into and the most feature-rich to sort of build on top of. C Lightning, I don't think of the APIs that as rich. I think things have changed lately with plugins, but I haven't had time to sort of look through it as I did initially with LND and all. Eclair is sort of the same as C Lightning. The API isn't as rich, but I think they're making updates and improving that. So hopefully soon the API will be rich, as feature rich as the other implementations. So Bitcoin Pay, well, it just uses C Lightning or LND. So the API is pretty similar to both. I think there's some restrictions with LND. Originally, when I was integrating Lightning into Bitrefill, I don't think anyone else had shipped anything on mainnet. So there was no Bitcoin Pay or anything when I first started this. I think the only other service that launched before us was Y'all's. We launched shortly after in private. And then OpenNode, it also didn't exist. And we like to keep custody of our own funds. But I think it's a great choice for people that want to get their feet wet and sort of want to experiment with Lightning payments and receiving and don't want to host a node. And the payment processors, those are mostly for merchants. You can't really build software services on top of this. So yes, there was not many choices in late 2017 when I started implementing Lightning into production or on mainnet. LND was pretty much the only implementation at the time that was safe enough to get running on mainnet. And even then, we had to apply patches to get this on mainnet. Initially, they didn't have Bitcoin D support, so I had to run BTCD, which was sort of a pain because the sync time took 2 weeks on mainnet. which was insane for me. I mean, Bitcoin was a few hours at most, less than a day. I found issues with that because if, say, BTCD got corrupted or something, it would take 2 weeks or something to reindex or something, some absurd long time. So for our current integration for LND, I have a server instance that's running Linux that hosts LND and Bitcoin. Originally, it was BTCD. So since we already had a Bitcoin integration with the Node software, it was pretty easy to sort of add in Lightning payments. We already store orders. We store on a database where we had a payment notification endpoint used to avoid double refilling. And there was only really a small amount of tweaks needed to actually integrate Lightning into our service. So for an MVP level integration for Lightning, only with receiving, it only requires actually a few API calls. It isn't really that complicated. I think LND has a really great API. And here's the link for those of you that want to see that. I think we're quite late into the hackathon, so most of you have probably already looked at documentation. But for Berryflow, for example, we run with a small Node.js instance on the same server that LND is hosted on. And we have like an internal private API that's run through Nginx. And then for the API, one of the few APIs you need to accept payments is the add invoice. The parameters are the ones that you really need are memo, Satoshi amount, or expiry. You don't actually need to set the expiry, or even the Satoshi amount. It could be a 0 amount invoice. But for orders, you probably want to set that. So here's an example response when I set the memo to Bitrefill in the order ID, Satoshi amount, and expiry. And there it is under that decoded. And then on the right is you can see how it looks like on our payment view, which you can tell that it's not really too different from what it would look like if it was Bitcoin payments. You would replace the invoice with a Bitcoin address and maybe different units. So the memo for us contains the order ID, which I think is useful because most wallets show the memo field in the history section. And for us, we use it to keep track of the Lightning orders coming in when we get a hook. We also set a fallback address. Not all services actually even have a fallback address set for invoices. I think it makes sense for, say, merchants or even any service that has a high amount or medium level amount for a payment. So say if a routing payment fails, you're still able to pay the invoice and have it succeed if routing fails on-chain. Unfortunately, I don't think LND provides notifications for this. I think they do for their on-chain wallet, but in our case, we already have a backend set up to track Bitcoin addresses for orders. So for me, it was just as easy as plugging it in, and on my end, I handle the notifications on that. I think LND will fix that and have it so it's built into the wallet so that I don't have to keep track of it, or say other users of LND don't need a separate system to keep track of this. It also doesn't mark the invoice paid if you pay the on-chain wallet address. So the second step sort of API you need is the payment notifier. So you have a way to generate an invoice to have someone pay. You need to be notified of it. In our case, we use a subscribed invoices, which is a unidirectional stream through gRPC. We also set the settle index. So that means like what index the payment you received was at. So say if you had 5 payments, the index would be 4 because the index starts at 0, I believe. And this is useful because if you have a script, I mean, if you have a notifier and you subscribe, if you restart the backend for that, you may miss a payment on the LND side. So if you have this index and you have it saved on the server, if you restart the backend Node.js instance, it will resubmit anything that was missed, which is, I think, pretty useful. So in that notification usually is the whole invoice state, which shows info about the invoice, the memo, and said if it's settled or not, how much was paid. I think in some cases, invoices may be overpaid in the protocol. I think you can pay like twice the amount. Initially, the settle field was a bool, and now I think they're moving to a state where it shows settled. I have to check that. I haven't actually transferred over to using that. I believe the settle will be deprecated soon. So you should probably update to using the state field or just start off the bat there if you're integrating right now. So for a hackathon context, you can also do it the manual polling way. You can have sort of a button on your app where if a user pays and they know they paid on their wallet, they can click the button and check, have it the backend check the payment status. So this is just like a manual way. You can take the payment hash from the invoice and you plug it into the API endpoint lookup invoice, and then it will give you the same invoice state properties, and it will tell you if it has been paid or not. So some common issues I've seen with running Lightning for more than a year, I've seen duplicate payments. Sadly, in LND production, I mean, they fixed it so you can't send out duplicate payments, but you still can receive duplicate payments. And other wallets haven't exactly fixed this issue or prevent that in some cases. So in some cases, I get a duplicate payment and it doesn't actually show in the node state that it was paid twice. It also doesn't show the correct amount paid. I believe this is pending a fix, probably not a priority, but for me, I have to manually go in and check the logs, in which it will tell you in the logs that it accepted a duplicate payment and for what hash. And you can also look at use the lookup invoice API to see what invoice that is if you don't store that on another database or something. I also have the issue where people pay payments after expiration. So in some rare cases, users pay and it expired, but it still went through. I haven't seen this lately. I think it was a bug, but in some cases, for LND, a payment may settle on chain. So it may get stuck and then it may still come to us, but at a later point when it's confirmed. In some cases, I believe if you restart LND, it will not tell you. So you have to check manually for this. So I'll get into backups. So for the first year-ish, it's probably a good idea to do some level of backups. And we had meaningful capacity and we kept growing and growing. But for many months, we did not have any recovery scenario for our Lightning node. I mean, we would back up the channel DB often, but that doesn't mean you'll get the off-chain funds. There's a seed that you get when you initialize the wallet, and you can back up the on-chain funds, but not the off-chain funds. And if your backup is out of date and you restore this backup, you may sort of breach yourself and you close channels. You may breach yourself and lose all the money in all those channels that you first closed that had an update. So that wasn't really a good idea as well. So recently, a few days ago, actually, I think the static channel backups PR was merged. I would recommend everyone to update to 0.6, even if it's not released. I think they're on RC3, so they should be released soon. It integrates static channel backups, which is like an encrypted backup of all channels, which lets you safely recover off-chain funds. I don't think if they're in HTLCs. But this also requires that you trust all the other peers that you have. I mean, all the other persons on the other end of the channel, all the other nodes. You have to trust that they're going to force close and follow through with this procedure. So it's still better than nothing. If you get corrupted and you can't recover a state and you don't know you're at the correct state, you can still at least try this. It's like a fail-safe, at least. I sleep better at night because we have a ton of Bitcoin online in basically a hot wallet where at least I know we can attempt to salvage some of it. So the way this works is there's an API that lets you set a backup location and it automatically saves a new channel backup every time a new channel is created. Right now, I'm at least rsyncing it every minute. It isn't ideal, but there are other ways where you can back it up to an S3 bucket. You can back it up in some other locations. I've included 2 links of 2 scripts that people have created in the last few days. One by, I think someone posted on Slack, Darwin, and one by Alex Bosworth on Twitter. And ideally, you host backups in many locations, not in the cloud. You want to have it like locally saved as well, or in many places, in my opinion. So incoming capacity. So another issue with Lightning is you need to have incoming capacity, which means people open channels to you and people are able to pay you. If you don't have that, then you can't receive payments or even I mean, there are different ways to do this. If you're a popular service, I think people will just do this automatically to earn fees because they know people will route to you. It's like a fee arbitrage opportunity. I mean, we've never had a problem with incoming capacity, but we're probably one of the biggest economic nodes on the network, in my opinion, from seeing on my end, people paying us. So we never had a problem with people opening channels to us. If anything, we have too many channels, so I've had to limit it on our end. So we also provide a service for this. We will open a channel to a node that buys this service from us, ranging from like I believe it's 500,000 satoshis to 0.16 Bitcoin. There are also other services popping up that provides a similar service, maybe cheaper. We have a guaranteed service. We have a lot of incoming capacity. So here are some good configurations to set for a big LND node. In this case, it's only for LND. Everything I've been talking about so far, LND, except for when I talk about the other nodes. You probably want to have a min channel size. Before this was a feature, we had the problem at Berryfill where we would have many people open small channels to us and send a small amount of money through it, which would mean potentially if they close the channel, we just get a few cents worth and it's dust. It was pretty worthless. This can happen as well for a big channel, but it means it limits the amount of potential UTXOs, and it helps not have too many peers connecting to us. There's also IP tables policy is a good idea, not to have too many connections from IP. You increasing the file descriptor limit on Linux, I think Windows as well. It's a good idea. There was an attack last year where a company was intentionally connecting to many nodes to sort of crash them. This sort of mitigated that. I haven't had any issues. Recently, the Lightning Labs have been working at helping bigger nodes run better. So they included the features where you can where it starts up better. So these workers configuration, as well as the stagger initial reconnect. I haven't actually enabled that one yet, but that one should make it so that the node does not connect to all the channel peers you have at once. So if you have 450 peers, they won't try to make 450 connections right away. I think it makes 10 connections and then it staggers the rest, which is a good idea. I had initially the problem where our node was crashing, and at startup it was unresponsive because of that. I also use Supervisor D to monitor and automatically restart a node. You actually want to have an uptime with the Lightning nodes. If you're down, you can potentially have money stolen from you, so any extended downtime can lead to fund loss. I use Supervisor D, works fine for me. So here's another downside, capital downsides, is having capital be locked up. And I mean this in the case of a private channel. Say if you have peers that open a channel to you, you can't really route the money out of there. So it's sort of locked there. That's if you're a routing node. Many developers recommend maybe you don't run a routing node if you don't want to have this problem. I mean, it's potential fee revenue, so it's not really locked up. I mean, there also aren't many exchanges where you can sort of send Bitcoin over that to sell it over Lightning. There is a tool though that Lightning Labs released, which is called Loop, where you can loop out funds trustlessly off chain to on chain without trusting anyone. But I foresee different services coming out where it lets you offload capital. I think it'd be less of an issue when more exchanges come live and splicing is live as well. And then there's also the obvious hot wallet risk, and that's a downside of being a routing node, or even if you run without routing, it's still a hot wallet. Funds can be stolen if you're compromised. I think we've been growing and growing, and I try to take funds out, but we have so many payments that are coming in that I don't want to close channels and sort of piss someone off. I would also recommend to run multiple nodes. So initially, I only had one Lightning node running LND. Probably wasn't a good idea when it started going too big. If you run more than one, it eliminates service downtime, but I mean, it's sort of something that's pretty obvious. I think I already talked about auto restarting. So here are 3 nodes that I currently run, 2 LND nodes and 1 Eclair node. And as you can see, on 1ML, it's Explore for Lightning nodes. So you can see the balance, the capacity a node has. And that isn't really accurate. Oh, I need to fix that typo. 22.5 Bitcoin. In reality, we actually have 26.2 Bitcoin in that one node and 444 channels, the rest being private. This is our fallback node. I actually want to have it so it just sort of goes back and forth, creating orders between the two, or fallback if one is misbehaving. And then I have an Eclair node that I just started up last week. So after doing that, I haven't really had any issues with service downtime. I can safely upgrade a node. Not safely, I can upgrade a node without having someone not have a payment go through or stuff like that. So I think for channel management, I haven't really looked too much into this. There's so much to do. But it'd be a good heuristic to see how good nodes are, peers are to you that have channels open to you. Maybe it'd be a good idea if you're connected to another routing node, if they have a channel that's going offline often, it's not reliable, maybe just close that channel because they're unreliable. If you keep getting stuck payments through one node, maybe just close the channel and not open any more channels or accept any channels from that node. Rebalancing is also a good idea. Increases your success of routing. I haven't actually done any of that yet, but it's a project I've been meaning to get to. I've also, when I set up the second node, I learned some things. The second one didn't have any liquidity at all. So what I did is I started the second node. I created a channel from our big node, our original node. I created a channel and I had it so it self-rebalances. So orders can still come through and it goes through our node and it would self-rebalance. So it would always have capacity to this node. And eventually I would see people would actually open channels to this new node to potentially earn fees. And now it's like a it doesn't really need the self-rebalancing at this point anymore, but it's still nice to have. So if I restart the big node, the second one can still accept payments without the first one. And what I also recommend is update often. I mean, I'm always up to date here. I'm often actually forced to be on the latest released on master. I run into issues a lot, bugs, and I'm always reporting it to the teams. I think everyone else would probably run into it if they had a big enough node. I'm happy to report them and have them fixed. 0.6, for example, dramatically improves classic performance and issues I was having before I updated. I think it should be really soon. And I would also recommend doing accounting for even the basic level accounting, like keep a daily snapshot of off-chain balances, incoming funds, outgoing funds, routing, channels and info, because you won't realize something's going wrong unless it's too late. So we do accounting for our nodes, and we actually are improving our accounting there as well. So now I finally get into sending off-chain payments. This is a tricky one. I think there are many edge cases when sending Lightning payments. I think you should know the HTLC lifecycle as a requirement before you ship any online node in production that has sending. Receiving is easy. Sending is the hard part. I know Eclair and NND are improving their payment APIs to make it easier for developers, but for a hackathon, you can safely ignore this. I mean, everyone's running on testnet, I would assume. Here's an example PR by Async, which improves their payment API. So here's sending off-chain payments. You also have to be, let's see. You also should be aware of this. You should probably not do free Lightning withdrawals or without limits or rate limiting it or charging a fee or keeping track of this, because you can even steal money if you do this. And then the attacker can intentionally create. I'll try to explain slower. An attacker can create a route. I mean, attacker created a scenario where they control two nodes, and they pay one of their nodes. And the route will always go through the attacker's node, and the attacker will earn a fee if they pay the destination node. So you can sort of do this over and over again and charge the routing fee and have it even be 0.11% and charge what the service allows. And you can just do money like that. I don't think anyone really does that, but I've already talked about this in a previous talk I had, so it's nothing new, but many people may not be aware of this. It's fine if you limit it and you keep track of it. Lightning with centralized services. It's probably not a good idea to offer a combined Bitcoin balance unless you have some limits or fees. It's not that they're different Bitcoin, like the exchange rate. I mean, It's just that there comes issues with if you treat them the same. So if you deposit, say for example, you have a service that's centralized and you allow Lightning deposits with Bitcoin. If you just allow deposits and you allow the user to withdraw on chain for free, they can potentially deplete all of your incoming capacity and withdraw it all on chain just for free. And that would cause a severe service disruption. No one would be able to pay fees. I mean, you can mitigate this by charging a small % fee, maybe a base fee for land deposits. It doesn't sound nice, but you kind of need to do this if you have one balance. It's not an issue if you have a separate balance. This is what, say, Wallet of Satoshi does, or Blue Wallet. I don't think Blue Wallet charges a fee deposit, but Wallet of Satoshi does. And they don't allow you to sort of go back to on-chain. You have to use an external service that charges a fee. So they're doing it right. I'll also talk about LN URL. So for mobile wallets, it's kind of a hassle to sort of share your node ID or do any complex interactions. Like if you have a service that allows a withdrawal, you have to copy the invoice and then paste it into the service on a computer. It's kind of a hassle. LN URL just makes it easy. You can scan it and then you can send arbitrary data to the service or even communicate back and forth. We actually use this for our channel opening service Thor. If you have the mobile wallet, Bitcoin Lightning wallet, you can buy a channel, scan a QR code, and they will pass the node ID and connect to our node, and it will open the channel to you, which is cool, I think. We also do the same thing with TurboThor. We use LN URL. In that case, we also use a forked version of Eclair, and I'll explain what turbo channels are. So we just launched this yesterday. This lets you spend Bitcoin instantly from an unconfirmed Lightning channel. So what this is we're selling a pre-funded Bitcoin channel that has a amount pushed, and when the user redeems this using Bitcoin Lightning Wallet or any other service that supports this, they're able to instantly be able to spend the money in that channel. But to be clear, it's a trusted service. You have to trust that the provider will not double spend that channel or that they will fulfill this. They will open it for you. Otherwise, the service can steal money from you. I think in our case, we are a trusted service. We already sell thousands of dollars worth of gift cards to hundreds of users every day. I think we have some trust, so it's not a big deal there for us. WebLN, I would also encourage everyone to check out WebLN for a better user experience. We have it integrated at Bitrefill for orders, deposits, withdrawals. It sort of lets you do request, you can request an invoice from a Lightning wallet with a click of a button and have the invoice be automatically pasted into the browser without you having to copy and paste or manually do anything. I can see this being extended to support Bitcoin addresses and other methods, maybe a seamless experience with Thor. I know there's a channel opening service that does this, but only with the node ID. But yeah. And then questions? I think I'll stop sharing the thing. I can answer some questions.
Awesome. Hey, that was like a pretty great overview of all the L&D APIs and stuff. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I had to cut some stuff, but maybe I should have.
Yeah, somebody on the chat room, they asked, how many customers do you guys have and merchant partners, and is the L&D space growing?
Yeah, we actually are growing. Like our volumes are growing, our number of users are growing. Like I think it 3x'd. It was pretty flat last year, but I mean, I think with the incoming surge of Lightning payments, Lightning wallets on mobile, it's sort of picking up. I mean, it does better than some altcoins we provide. I mean, I can't share numbers, but it's pretty good in my opinion. I think we're one of the biggest Lightning merchants right now.
Nice. Would you mind stop sharing the screen for me? That it can be a little bit more interactive on the video. Perfect.
Yeah. So resources to update L&D, the API site, the search API L&D Lightning, and there's a section that lets you update easily.
Yeah, one question I had is, you mentioned that we should have multiple Lightning Network nodes, right? So
if you're a service that's big enough to sort of warrant it, I think.
Yeah. So like, how do you build the infrastructure to tie it to the front end of your service, right? Like, let's say one node goes down, and that's the first node that generates the invoice for your website. If that node goes down, how do you structure it so that it goes to the second or third node?
It's all on the back end. Sort of if you get an error, request error from the node, depending on the API you use, you can just fall back to generating an invoice from the second node automatically.
Nice.
Nothing on the front end. It's all on the back end.
Okay,
Yeah,
so from your point of view, what are the biggest limitations of the Lightning Network right now?
I think liquidity, tighten up liquidity, maybe. Maybe potentially having to go on chain uh, for HTLCs when you have to go on chain. Maybe fees, the commit fee. If you have $20 fees, I mean, you sort of had $20 of the channel you can't use. All those are issues that sort of can be fixed in the future. I mean, I don't think in the future we'll even have a commit fee. It'll be a different type of structure used. What's our current stack with LND? I mean, we use Node.js with gRPC. I mean, it's pretty simple. I think gRPC, you can sort of hook up that API to use with several different languages. So it just works right after that, like natively. Do I think every user will have their own node in the future? I mean, I think in the future you can maybe a light node. Maybe the more hardcore users that want to just run their own node, or maybe at some point everyone on the phone. And hopefully, in my opinion, I want to see that. You see a lot of fallback transactions? No, and the reason why we don't see a lot of fallback transactions is because there's no wallet to actually support this. There's BLW, Bitcoin Lightning Wallet on Android, which supports paying fallback addresses, but it only does it if you have no channels open. Like ideally, the case should be if routing fails, let's fall back to paying on chain and open the channel at the same time.
What seems to be like the culprit for the most failed payments in production? Is it maybe payment size, routing, etc.?
I think maybe payment size and maybe payments getting stuck along the routing as well. But it's hard to know because as a merchant, I don't know if someone failed to make a payment to me. I can't tell if they just generated an invoice just to look at it.
Yeah, actually, so in your slides, you mentioned that sometimes, maybe early on, people were able to pay expired invoices.
Yes.
Okay, and then so the payment would go through even though like, the invoice was expired.
Well, it would, yeah, and it depends on the wallet, I think.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
Maybe you got I think there's many situations. Maybe it got stuck along a route and it gets paid, or if it's settled on chain, so the payment got stuck, but then it went through, but on chain, it closed the channel and paid on chain. In that case, yeah, but all of these are issues that sort of LND is fixing on their API side. I think Eclair had the same problem and they just fixed it. They send out notifications on those type of payments.
Yeah, another issue that I kind of found was I was making a payment on the Lightning Network and then the funds left, but then it never got through because I guess there wasn't enough liquidity. But the funds were never returned back to me, and like I hear like it takes some time for it to get back to me. So can you walk me through the process of like what exactly happened in that situation?
So say you use the Bitcoin Lightning wallet and you try to route a payment to a merchant. In some cases, if the nodes you route through are flaky or they're a bad node or unreliable, the node goes offline and the payment's sort of stuck. Like the money has gone through, but you cannot cancel that payment until the node comes back on. Or you can cancel it, but you have to cancel it on chain and recover the funds if
Oh,
it's worth the payment. So a lot of people don't realize this cycle of the HTLC. Like they don't realize how the payments actually work. So in a worst case, a payment can take like a day to it depends on the timeout. I think it can take a day to even come back to you. And it's not safe to sort of send again because the payment can still go through.
right. And then, yeah, so that's pretty interesting. So I've got to wait for the HTLCs to time out in order for for my wallet to have my funds back.
Yeah, so a workaround around this is you sort of probe the path first with a fake payment. And if it works, then you send the payment, the real one.
Okay, another question is, how large and verbose do you recommend the logs to be?
I mean, we have so much logs that I mean, I have the default logs setting. If I'm having an issue and I'm debugging with Lang Labs or another developer, they'll tell me to up the logs on a certain log level for a certain subsystem. But I have everything default. But I save like months and months, gigabytes worth of logs.
Wow, that's impressive. Okay.
I mean, it has already helped fix a few bugs because I saved that much logs.
Dude, yeah. So small bucks, but giant backups to your logs.
Yeah.
What is your cloud or hardware configuration for Bitcoin D and LND?
I think it's just the medium of the AWS. Like ideally, you would not have it on there, but as a startup, it's kind of hard to have it offline. If you have it in, say, office space, you have to secure against hardware. I mean, physical attacks, and then the network may not be, I think, reliable. So you may be down. So there are issues there. But ideally, we would have it offline. I mean, on site or something.
Nice. Yeah. Do you partner with any Lightning Wallet company?
Partner in one sense. We have a widget and an embedded route for our website where you're able to show all of our products on any wallet you want. So we can partner with any wallet, but we don't currently. I mean, in the sense that we do have partners that have our site on. I don't know from the top of my head if there's any Lightning ones. Oh yeah, so for Blue Wallet, they have our website in their DApp browser or whatever, lab browser. So in a sense, we do partner, but it's no formal partnership. They can ask us for referrals, which they get a percentage. I think we haven't set that up yet. But if there are any Lightning wallets that want to partner with us, feel free to contact us. We're excited to partner with people.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Whoever asked that question, maybe he was fishing for a partnership. So there you go. There's your answer. What is the safest way to shut down a Lightning node before an upgrade?
LNCI stop. I mean, they should tell you in the logs if it stopped. I wouldn't kill it. In some cases I've had to, but I haven't had any issues lately. Just stopping it and checking the logs that you made sure the process is not active still. You can do PS, AUX, and grep LND and see if there's anything active. Maybe back up the .lnd directory before you upgrade, because maybe if you upgrade and there's a migration for the database might corrupt. But there's also the issue if that Lightning node connects online and updates a channel state, you can't really go back. Maybe in the future, we should be doing updates where the node does not connect out to anything or update anything. Upgrades, if it went fine, then it does that. So you can safely recover to a previous state.
Yeah, I guess like the fear is like losing your funds. Like what if you go down and somehow some payments went through, but your node was offline and it isn't aware of the channel updates, and then you upgrade it and you bring it back up online. Is that a possible threat model?
I mean, there were some issues around that actually were an issue. There was the issue if an incoming payment is being sent to you and it's settling on chain, which means the HTLC is being claimed on chain. If you restarted the LND node, it would never show that you actually paid, that you were actually paid anything. You wouldn't not get the money, the node. It would just be an accounting issue, and you would have to manually check. So I actually had to do this a couple times, where people say they paid me, it didn't show in LND or LNCI, and I have a script that checks. I ask the user for a pre-image and the invoice. They send me that, and I check if it verifies, and then I send them a refund or send them the gift card or something if that was the case.
Nice. Yeah, and you briefly touched on static channel backups. Just in case like people in the chat may not be fully aware, like how does SCB ensure that your funds are safe and that you don't lose anything to a penalty transaction?
Yeah. So doing traditional backup means just copying everything over to another directory. And if the current state, the current wallet gets corrupted, you can sort of just back up in a traditional sense that works. For Lightning, it means you lose money, because if all those channels had a new update, whether it be a new anything, commit fee or any update, if you broadcast that latest state and the other node sees that, they think you're stealing money from them, and they will steal everything. So SCV, what it does is there is a safety protocol for data loss. It's called data loss protection. And what the SCV file does is it's a collection of all of the info needed for you to be able to contact the other end of the channel, the node, the other end of the channel, and say, hey, I need this info, force close the channel. The other node force closes the channel, and you're able to recover the funds in that channel. And you only need to back up that file once per channel when it was created. So it's yeah, but that you have to sort of trust the other node that they will do that. But I mean, you can sort of fake it, where you can sort of test your peers out, your nodes out. You can say, oh, I need this. And if they broadcast a state that's favorable to them, and we don't actually need that, we can take all of their money. So you're still testing it out, the game theory around this.
Nice.
So ideally, everyone would just follow through with the data loss protection, and you would get the off-chain funds back, except the pending HTLCs. I think those are lost for the node that's doing that.
Yeah, one of the downsides I would say is I would have hoped for it to, for a safer mechanism to come back online without closing the channels, because you would have to reopen it again with the other party, right?
Yeah, that's an issue.
So another person in the chat, they have this question: have you hit any limitations in number of requests per minute, or anything with LND or Bitcoin during peak times?
I haven't had any issues with like peak times in the sense of requests. Yeah, I've had lots of issues. Only because when you have a big node, you're sort of on the frontier, discovering new bugs, being the first to have like so many peers connect to you. I've had issues where my node is crashing. I've had issues where the node would crash and it would not start back up. But I mean, I'm friendly with the devs at Lightning Labs and Eclair, and I've always debugged the issue with them. They gave me a patch. I patched that, and it works. I had the issue with the network's getting kind of really big, so our nodes gossiping to all of the peers at once, and that would cause a lot of issues with the node. So basically, when the node would start up, it would start connecting to all the peers at once, at one time. I would not be able to use any RPC commands. I cannot do get info. I cannot do anything. I cannot add an invoice. It's just frozen for like 10 minutes. So this is one of the other reasons why I had a second node, because the node got so big that I was having these scaling limitations in the software. But with the latest release of 0.6, like the node starts up and it's smooth as butter. Like they fixed all of those issues. So
nice. So the key is to build good relationships with Lightning Labs devs and Eclair devs. Cool.
But I mean, they now have a node on mainnet that should probably have a lot of channels, so they'll probably be seeing issues if they're anything before me now, hopefully. Yeah.
All right, Justin, thank you so much for your time. If people have other questions, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter, JUSCAMARENA. I'm on the LND Slack, Justin. I'm my last name. You'll see me around. I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone's interested in integrating Lightning. If they're not sure they're doing something right, just feel free to contact me. I'm happy to help. I've had so many people in the community help me out when I was learning, so I'm happy to help back.
Love that. Yeah, and he's also on the BlockView Slack. So if you're a hacker and you want some advice on your project and with LND, definitely reach out to him.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Our next talk is Francis. Oh, let me look his name up real quick. Yeah, Francois Rottenbeck. Oh gosh, I'm killing these names. It's terrible. But he's going to be talking about brick and mortar and the LN. Tickets are still on sale, and they will be on sale until the start of his talk. So join us within the next hour. Thanks, guys.